Hello, this is Tony Robinson, and I've got a question I want to ask you. What do great teachers do, and are you a great teacher? So we're going to answer that question today. Uh, and how we've come to this conclusion is there was a review of some testimonies of some of the most successful teachers in CIP, and we've come up with a list of the most frequently mentioned pedagogical practices that these folks are putting into play. So one of the things that was commonly spoke of was instruction is planned and structured, that there's not any surprises and students know what's going to happen every day at a certain time. There's not any surprises for teachers or the students. And know your students and love your students. We'll go into a little more in depth with that just a little bit with a video from Rita Pearson. Some of you are probably familiar with Rita Pearson. She's since passed away, but anyway, her message is very applicable to what we're trying to do. Also, another thing that was pretty common, was teachers and students have high expectations. Another thing here that students were screened to determine the ability levels. Formative assessments were taking place on a daily basis, and formative assessments are a way to know where the kids are. So again, that's part of the screening process. Instruction was driven by data and student mastery, so it's not that you move on because students didn't get it. You wait, you reteach until they do get it, and you move along with that. Intervention was student specific. It happens daily and at a specific time. Almost to a teacher, every teacher mentioned that they had either a 30 or 40-minute intervention time, and their intervention was taking place with those students who did not master the particular skill, and they were able to work with those until they were able to get them where they needed to be. Also, these teachers talked about students taking ownership of their own learning, and they were able to monitor their own progress. There were data walls that were talked about, and looking at data with students, and students taking ownership of that and wanted to know where they were and what it took to get to the next level. Explicit instruction was taking place on a daily basis with all students. There was modeling that was done. There were exemplars that were used, so students were able to know what their work was supposed to look like before they ever started, so they'd know how to replicate that in the end. A variation of resources are used. Almost to a teacher, they talked about no worksheets being used, so they look for resources or way to gamify their work or some other way except for using worksheets. So worksheets were not something that was mentioned very often. Open-ended higher order questions are being used, so that more higher end Bloom taxonomy questions are being used. So if there was a multiple choice question or technology enhanced question, it wasn't something that students were surprised about. Another thing that happened was that there was strong administrative support. These administrators were strong instructional leaders, and they were able to help their teachers become better, and they encouraged them to work toward that. Another thing that was fairly common in each of these conversations was they talked about spiral review was taking place every day for the entire year. And students were given immediate feedback. They didn't have to wait for information about where they were at and what they needed to do. Also, information was chunked for the students, so they were breaking down their units into manageable units so kids could get that, building up to the bigger picture. And information was presented by way of small group instruction or stations. So teachers could work with individual groups, smaller groups, their teacher groups, while other students were doing independent work or computer work. Teachers mentioned that zeros were never given on an assignment, and they were usually how hard students worked on the assignment. So for them to be able to do that, and they were able to work on assignments in the classroom as far as homework was concerned. Homework was not something that they were asking students to do new skills. These were things that they were doing, that only things that they knew how to do. That's practice. Great teachers were not satisfied with the status quo and not afraid to step out of their comfort zone to benefit their students. They were able to talk about some of the things they were doing as far as their professional goals for themselves. It can be for your evaluations, but if your professional goals are making you a better teacher, they're going to serve a dual purpose. Great teachers were lifelong learners. So they were leading their kids and they were modeling that for their students. And great teachers made learning practical and fun for their students. So what ways can we make this learning apply to what we're doing. We have some folks who are participating in the Rural Math Innovative Network and talking about how to make Algebra 1 more applicable to jobs that may not be students who go, these are skilled jobs of students who may not go to college. May go to trade schools or go to your institutions to get to that. So that's making that practical and fun. Here's a video I want you to watch. This is Rita Pearson. This information here would be applied to any teacher. So, you know, you've seen and heard what some of these more successful teachers have done, and what can we do, or what can you do to work toward gain that status of a great teacher. So let's hear what Rita Pearson has to say.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good. Some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is going to be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class. Because I am the best teacher and you are the best students, they put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on his paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Kirsten, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection. It's the relationship. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
I just want to say that you look at some of these things that great teachers do, and I guarantee there are people in your building that are doing this. So I encourage you to ask your principal to do peer observations, to have some conversation with those folks in your building who are doing some things that you would like to be able to do, and just sharing that. So if there's anything that you need help with, please contact me and I'll help you in any way that I can. And thank you for participating and watching this. Have a great day.